Hello, my name is Laura Narina. I am an executive editor at BTN Europe, and we are here at the BTN Studio at the Business Travel Show Europe 2025. And with me in the studio, I am here with Gee Mann, entrepreneur and the founder of Travlr ID. Gee, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me again.
So, Gee, you were also the winner of our Innovation Face-Off a few years back in 2023, and you were a judge as part of last year's Innovation Face-Off. So I think it would be pertinent for us to talk about travel tech innovation today. And I think travel tech, or tech innovation within the managed travel space can be rather complex. I often find that that collection of words can often be an oxymoron because it is such a complex ecosystem. You are juggling traveller preferences with corporate policy, perhaps the objective to optimize cost. You know, they're tricky things to juggle. So I think my first question for you is, how would you describe innovation in managed travel right now?
I think there's a great raft of entrepreneurs now moving in. I think the ability to innovate using technology has been lowered with AI. So there is definitely easier to innovate for entrepreneurs like myself. But then the barrier is the incumbents that hold the relationships or where the managed travel tech stack lives today. So there is always a barrier to adoption because an industry has legacy tech or it has large ecosystem players that hold all the relationships. So I think from a technology perspective, definitely we're seeing some fascinating startups coming in. And they're not all doing the same thing. They are bringing new technology or emerging technology and applying them into the managed travel space, and it's fantastic to see. But there's still a little bit of a laggard when it comes to the adoption because some of the legacy players that exist.
That ownership piece, who owned the tech stack, I think is really pertinent here because we recently published our State of the Industry report where we spoke to several different players in the ecosystem. We surveyed travel managers across the globe, and we found that most of them still do rely quite heavily on their TMC for a lot of their tech stack. And we're talking about key elements of the tech stack here: the OBT, the traveller tracking technology, management of traveller profiles. And so I wanted to ask you, what does that mean for someone such as yourself, an entrepreneur, when these big legacy players are still the puppet master, if you will?
Definitely, there are scenarios which we've experienced ourselves. They are blockers, and these folks will block you from becoming especially in our ecosystem where we're trying to manage travel profiles. It's unheard of for a corporate to now be in the profile management tool, where it's usually offset by the OBT or the TMC. So for us to introduce ourselves into the mix, it does create challenges. But the other side of that challenge is travel teams don't necessarily have IT resources where they can start adopting new technologies or quickly adopt innovation. So what happens is they become dependent on their TMCs and OBTs who they're contracted, who do have the IT resources to adopt a roadmap. The issue is the speed of what the corporate needs and the speed of what these incumbents have are never aligned. I need something transformed in 6 months, 9 months, but it's not on the roadmap for the incumbent for maybe 24 months. You know, they plan 24 months out. Anything new on that roadmap is not going to get delivered. So you're always at mercy of somebody else's roadmap, their resources, and what they see as a priority. So that's the challenge you find, the fine balance between how important it is for the incumbent to put this forward for the travel for the corporate, but the corporate doesn't always have the IT resources to do it themselves. So there is a fine balance.
How can we overcome this challenge? I know that is a seemingly simple question, but I'm sure the answer is very complex.
It is complex, but at the same time, travel managers know how to navigate procurement, how to build the ROI use cases. I think entrepreneurs have to do a good job on making sure that they're empowering the travel teams for the use case. If the use case is not strong enough, no matter how good the tech is, they simply can't sell it internally for a budget. So I think entrepreneurs also have to be mindful of, you may have emerging tech, but if you can't build the use case, the adoption won't come too. So there is a two sides to this coin, that the entrepreneurs must build those use cases.
Obviously, we do need TMCs to be able to innovate at a large scale in order to really move the needle, I think, for the industry at large. There is a lot of talk at the moment around investment in innovation, particularly around AI. Now, that's most, but not all, of the investment that's taking place. However, it's a hot topic. So I wanted to talk around, first and foremost, AI, and I also wanted to go back to our State of the Industry report, because there we accumulated some qualitative data around the fact that travel managers are still very much waiting to see applications of AI in the managed travel space. So very explicit examples, if you will. So they're either waiting to see that, or they're still learning about AI and what it can do for them. So I wanted to ask you, Gee, what kind of that means for the pace of change. And as we move into this world of agentic AI, the broader implications of that.
The speed at which innovation in AI is moving is unreal. It's unprecedented. It's not something that's been seen before in technology as a whole. So when it comes for a travel manager to figure out what they should do based on the conversations today, tomorrow is already out of date. So the speed is unreal. But that doesn't mean the adoption should be. Now, there's some challenges there as well, because you have to look at where you're going to get the value. So are you empowering a customer service support agent with AI to improve the workflow, or are you trying to use AI to replace the customer service? And that is a completely different use case. You should never be in the business of trying to put people out of work. You should never be. And you do need humans in the loop. But then when you build those, again, going back to the use cases and ROI, it's very important that you're building out what are the metrics you're trying to fix. Many a time you're trying to fix response times. It doesn't mean taking the human out of the loop. You may introduce an AI agent, and actually you end up taking the same amount of time to get a resolution. So it's very important that we understand where we should be applying AI. And that's the problem the travel managers have today. There's all this buzz about AI, but where do I put this in my managed program to build ROI? And then it comes back to, well, the workflows sit with the agency or they sit with the OBT. So how, if you don't own the data, how can you then do predictive analytics or do recommendations, or how can you take your program to the next level when you don't even own the data? So that's the first tier. The second is AI agents is a workflow that an agent's going to be orchestrated to do on your behalf. Actually, this week, Google have donated to the Linux Foundation an agent-to-agent workflow, which means it's open source. So this is very interesting because it levels the playing ground for folks that want to adopt agent to agent. So let's talk about what that means. A corporate may have an AI agent that wants to get, expense data and wants to run some sort of analytics on top of this. TMC may have an AI agent, and they are able to access data silos within the TMC for this customer. And for the ability for those two agents to talk to each other, well, the framework's been made open source. So folks trying to monetize in a space where these frameworks and protocols are being made open source gets quite interesting. It will allow other incumbents to come in, and it lowers the cost barrier of adopting these technologies. So there's multiple layers of the agent, AI agent and agentic workflows, but it does definitely beg the thought that if these things are becoming open source, why is the cost so high for adoption?
That could potentially lower that cost barrier. What would it do about safety and security? Because that was another reason behind a lot of travel managers taking that wait and see approach and still learning, because they have concerns around cybersecurity.
And that goes back to some of the data when it comes to privacy concerns. There are some folks that are making sure, and a good example for anyone listening to this interview, if you're using ChatGPT, simply go in there and type, "What do you know about me?" And I think you'd be shocked at the profile that it throws out. It will give you a persona on the inquiries you make, your interests, the things you have challenges, your weaknesses. So the model's learning everything about you as you go. And that's not for all of the models, but in particular, I'm referencing ChatGPT. The corporate should have the same concerns when it comes to personal identifiable information or corporate data when you feed these models. Now, there are folks that do this with privacy in mind, but longer term, how do you ensure that these models are not consuming this personal identifiable information, and they can't be reverse engineered to extract this information? And that's where really industry leaders need to be taking this to, is that yes, we know AI workflows, but they're limited to real use cases because you can't stop it from consuming that data. And ultimately, Travlr ID, we're working on that. We're making sure that doesn't happen. So it's important that we're adopting that, and we have that mindset of what happens to the previously preserving data that you're feeding to AI.
Because travel often requires a lot of personal information, a lot of personal data. When you throw a corporate travel policy on top of that, there's a lot of corporate information that you don't want out in the world. And when we're talking about open source, that's where the concern arises. So that's still a work in progress, you would say?
I wouldn't say that's a problem with the open source protocols. It's the data that feeds those protocols. You need systems in place before you adopt these protocols. So these protocols are just, you can tokenize data and they can talk to each other. It's the folks that adopt them. So I think that's when it's infancy at this stage, where we're not seeing real industry level use cases where that personalization is being offered.
Right.
Because the personalization you see today is limited to the platform you're connected to or the channel you're connected to. So if I'm booking on booking.com, all the data they've accrued about me is being personalized to me because I have a booking.com profile. That's fine, because they have all the bells and whistles when it comes to security for when I'm in within booking.com. But what happens in an AI agentic world when I'm able to take my data across different channels? What happens then? So that's what I mean about the protocols are fine. There's nothing wrong with the protocols per se, but there are steps before you get into this AI agent to AI agent workflows that you're previously preserving. And that's the part people keep, I underline it twice, privacy preserving is very, very important going forward.
The key piece there is around data ownership.
There is data ownership, and there is also cybersecurity. You have to have certain protocols that then protect the data. So it's both.
Talk to me a little bit more about the data ownership piece, because when we spoke previously, and you were detailing to me a little bit more about what Travlr ID is all about, we talked around the importance of owning the traveller profile. Now that currently, in most cases, still sits with the TMC. What if we were to own our own profile? What could that do for the managed travel industry?
From a Travlr ID perspective, our view is a profile is never just a personal data field. It's not just your personal preferences. For example, for Lauren, you have preferences are your needs, but then there is a whole load of corporate data that needs to sit on top of that. We call it co-managed data. And the reason we call it that is because corporate have got their policies and their fields, and then you've got your own. And that context can change if you're a guest profile or depending which part of the world you're, as a sponsor profile, or you're an employee profile or a contractor profile. So the individual is still the same, but the context in which the charge codes can change, I could be on an assignment, all these different scenarios are adaptable and dynamic. And you need to have a scenario where you can make a profile that can stack all these different contexts and then pass them to the right booking channel. So making that real. Imagine you are a guest profile today or a temporary profile in a corporate, and then you become a employee profile. Those have different attributes tested to it. As far as today's scenario, those profiles would be shared to an OBT and a TMC. They load to a GDS, and then there's all sorts of sync things that happen downstream. In a Travlr ID ecosystem, there's never a mismatch in sync between suppliers because a profile comes from the corporate. And different channels get different attributes. Now, if you have a big program and multiple travel ecosystem, you have multiple TMCs, multiple OBTs, maybe more than one risk provider, more than one card provider. How do you manage all those relationships? Yeah. And they need different data sets to be managed per channel. Corporate simply can't do that today. They rely on the TMC or the OBT to do that.
How far away are we from your vision of the travel ecosystem where that Travlr ID profile can move freely?
We have a internal say of A, B, C, D, and all the way through the alphabet. And A for us is starting with the traveller. B is then the corporate, for the corporate. And then C is their travel ecosystem partners. D is GDS. We are now in A to D. So how does a profile go from an individual all the way to GDS? We will eventually get into how does that get to suppliers. So we are quite a bit into our supply chain integrations and use cases about how that profile flows from anywhere from the corporate program directly to the GDS. So we're very excited that we're now doing A to D, and it's progressing really well.
And we will eventually get all the way to Z?
We will eventually get to Z. We will eventually get to Z. We're on it.
What aspect of the managed travel ecosystem, as wonderful and complex as it currently is, would you say is the most ripe for innovation?
I see a lot of gaps in compliance. There are folks that are doing compliance, but it comes back to data silos again. So there are fantastic suppliers that are doing duty of care, risk providers that are giving, but if they're not getting the information they need, then how do you personalize messaging to a traveler? Now, yes, obviously profiles play a part of quality of data, But messaging to travelers based on context, I think there's a great opportunity for compliance and as well as risk. So I think there's
particularly in today's world.
100%. With the environment we live in, right? Look at the geopolitical state. So if you look at where we are as in the world today, even more so. And we talk a lot about enhanced profile fields. If Travlr ID is able to generate enhanced profile attributes, accessibility needs, it could be medical conditions, it could be anything to do with diversity and inclusion. If I have all these attributes, then why are we not able to do messaging, personalized messaging for that traveler? So you have context. So I think there's a ripe opportunity around the messaging piece. And depending on the context, again, what is the program, who you're working for, which region you're working for, what's your title within the job. There's all sorts of different layers, but I think there's a ripe opportunity around messaging to travelers.
Gee, thank you so much
Thanks
for your time.
so much.